Thanks so much for coming. So as you might know, we have someone very special here, someone who's part of a very special family with a very special member, Max, and her sister, August. You might also know their dad, but I don't really want to talk as much about him today. I really want to get to know a little bit more about you. I think we hear a lot about the dorm room, those early days at Harvard from Facebook, but what I want to hear a little bit more of is your background. So you were a doctor and a teacher, and you'd done a lot to try to help the world before the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Was there a moment or an anecdote from those roles that you see as sort of your superhero origin story?
So I just think it's crazy that I'm here today. And the reason why just goes back so far. I grew up as children of Chinese Vietnamese refugees who came to this country with nothing, but the good luck of having been sponsored out of the refugee camps by the Catholic Church, and we arrived in Boston, where they had nothing but faith in the educational system and that things would be okay. I went through K through 12 in public school, where my only direction from my family was, work hard, you'll do well. And there wasn't much more detail after that. But I got lucky. I had teachers who took me under their wing and made sure that I knew what the SATs were, that I knew how to apply to college, that I had one mentor even go so far as to force me to play tennis, even though I was horrible. Because he was like, you need to be an athlete too. And I was like, I will never be an athlete. But all of that, I just thought that was part of growing up. The moment I realized that my life had become the fullest version of the American dream is when I showed up at Harvard that first day, and I realized that someone had reached down and pulled me out of the struggles that my family faced as being refugees, very working class, no college education. My mentors had reached down and pulled me up, and I had showed up at Harvard where there were opportunities that I didn't even realize were possible the moment before I set foot on campus. And that's when I realized that I needed to do everything to make sure that I was reaching back and pulling up as many other kids as possible, because I knew there were so many more deserving children, and I got lucky. And that's led me down the path of first being an after-school teacher in a low-income housing project right next door to where I grew up, and then an elementary school teacher, and then a pediatrician here at San Francisco General Hospital. But each time I just thought I needed to build one more skill set. I needed to do one more thing in order to help children, to pull them up so that they could see the opportunities that I've had available. And after 30 years, I came to the conclusion that you can only sort of try to break the rules so many times before you realize the whole system's broken. And that's the problem, why children don't have the opportunities they deserve. And right now we're just getting by with people doing extraordinary things to help kids get lucky.
So during those years when you were a teacher, I think you really saw the need not just for education, but for work in healthcare. And you guys have obviously made some significant donations towards that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But was there a moment during those times as a teacher where you realized that healthcare was not where it needed to be?
Well, there's been a couple of kids that have really made a big impact on my viewpoint. When I was working in the after-school program, I was a kid. I was 19 years old, and a adult, in my eyes, from one of my students' school came to see me and said, "Have you seen this student?" And I said, "No, I haven't. I figured she was out sick." She said, "I haven't seen this child in a couple days. I'd love your help in looking for her." And I said, no problem. I walked out into the housing projects after the after-school program that day, and I found her immediately, and she was in the playground, and her 2 front teeth were broken down the middle. And I thought, I had so many thoughts. One, I failed. How could I have not seen this? How could I have prevented it? Who hurt her? And has she gotten health care? Has she gotten the right dental care to prevent infection and treat pain? And that moment compelled me, like, I need more skills. To fight these problems, I need to get out there and build more skills. And so, at 22, I was like, I need to become a pediatrician. And I did that, and in my practice at San Francisco General, I saw the same kids, just this time in the clinic, and I always tried to ask, go the extra mile, like, how's school? How are things at home? Like, how can I help you access the resources you need to be successful? And then I failed again. I had another kid who was 8 years old, had missed 180 days of school. That is a full school year because of deep issues around domestic violence and miscommunication, where the school thought there was a health issue and the healthcare system, thought that there was a school issue. And this kid, who we ultimately tested and found to have normal intellectual abilities, didn't know his letters when he was 8 years old. So after failing and failing, those were the opportunities that showed me that we need to do something differently to make sure that the infrastructure is set up for children to be successful.
That's a really inspiring story, and thank you for telling us that. Big donors are giving the Giving Pledge, and I think we've seen a lot of the extraordinarily wealthy rally to try to address some of these problems. But meanwhile, we're also seeing a lot of the rank-and-file millionaires of the tech industry especially living relatively hedonistic lives and not necessarily giving as much. How do we get the rank-and-file rich involved in philanthropy to the same level that some people like you have?
I think the thing that I'm most excited about of what we're doing at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is giving in a way that is authentic to who we are and the skill sets that we have. And so we are trying to pair world-class engineering with grant-making, impact investment, building movements, policy. And the key to that is what's authentic to Mark and I. Mark's built a very successful technology company. We should bring that skill set to actually build an engineering team and orient those teams towards education, science, justice, and opportunity. I've been on the front lines as a practitioner, and I've seen sort of like what is possible when you reorient the system and break the rules of the current system. You can achieve incredible outcomes for patients, for students. And I think even the money part is incredibly important, because we wouldn't be able to do that without the money. But I think where we have unique leverage is applying our skill sets as living in the philanthropy world as living donors, and applying that in addition to the resources. And everyone can do that. And at CZI, I'm excited that we are building opportunities for engineers, designers, product managers to come and help design tools for the Human Cell Atlas, for our learning platform, for important issues in criminal justice reform. And I just encourage everyone to think deeply. It's not about money. And I think everyone in Silicon Valley has a very unique skill set that has brought tremendous advances in the consumer industry. But what if we oriented that towards important social issues as well? And it doesn't have to mean a full-time job. I had a call with someone who ran a SaaS company yesterday who's giving me great advice around how to actually build technology that can scale to many using open source philosophy. And I think everyone in our community, in our industry, has the opportunity to give in a way that many don't have access to.
So I think you guys have done an incredible job of leading by example, though I do think we need some kind of change in cultural norms. I know that Mark had a Jewish upbringing, and the Talmud instructs Jews to donate at least 10% of their income. Do we need some kind of meme or new cultural norm that makes multimillionaires feel like you're a jerk if you give less than that?
I think a huge part of why we've stood up and said that we want to do that is we want to put our name out there in saying we're willing to try this, and we're willing to share the lessons that we've learned through the process. so that others can benefit from that as well. But I think the other thing that's missing is, like, what is the impact we're going to make? And if I said, look, give us 10% of your income, the way you would evaluate that is different based on like how sure you are that you're going to be able to make an impact. And we are spending a lot of time and energy building up both a data team and a research team at CZI to help us learn and quantify so that we can better understand the impact we're able to have through philanthropy. And we're hoping that those resources actually encourage others to say, oh, I understand how I can better quantify what impact I can make if I make a leap towards doing this.
So how do you prioritize what causes to give? Do all lives matter equally, whether that's abroad or domestic or local versus national? And how do you think about that as well as with animal lives or the environment? How do you weigh those different sources or opportunities for giving?
Yeah. So right now, the issues that we work on at CZI are education. We are building resources to allow every child to have access to personalized learning experiences. In science, we have a mission of cure, prevent, or manage all disease. And in justice and opportunity, we want everyone to have access to just and fair opportunities in their lifetime. And we think about what we want to build as a future for everyone. It should be aspirational for all. And the place where equity has to come in is that we can't build an aspirational future and just assume that people will get there or they'll get lucky. The way we operationalize has to be around equity and how we make sure that the folks who are historically left behind have those additional measures to allow them to access that incredible future that we want to build for our children in the future generations. And so that's how we think about the framework and access overall. And then the way we choose problems and the types of projects that we tackle is also in remembering that philanthropy is small. We are incredibly small compared to the overall, our government, public systems, the infrastructure that already exists. The thing that we have going for us is that we can be incredibly nimble. So we have to think about where we are most leveraged with the resources that we have, and I think with the unique abilities that we have at CZI. So we tend to choose problems where we can access technology, where we need to think about comprehensive solution sets rather than one particular area or tactic. And with that lens, we choose problems that we are best suited for without saying that we have to fix everything in the ecosystem, because we know that we can't.
So I want to ask a little bit about national giving versus hyper-local giving. So Facebook's wealth was made here largely in the Bay Area, and that's where CZI's money comes from. But that success has also led to gentrification in the local areas and caused some tough times for people who live here who aren't part of the tech era. So how do you balance giving to those causes, even if they might not be necessarily as cost-effective due to the high cost of living in the Bay Area, versus other national causes? And do you think that you have an obligation to concentrate more of that giving locally to offset impacts made by how the money was created?
We love the Bay Area. The Bay Area is our home. It will be our children's home, and it's has been a place of incredible innovation for our country. It's one of our leading economic engines. But we all know, and we were just talking about how hard it is to live in the Bay Area. And we see it as our responsibility to help give back to making sure that the Bay Area can remain a vibrant, exciting community that people from all different backgrounds, all different socioeconomic strata can access. And within that mission, we look for places where we have a unique opportunity to give back. And we look at affordable housing. We've been thinking about how we can contribute to improving access to affordable housing. It's a huge problem. It's very expensive. If we threw all of our resources to affordable housing, we still would not be able to solve it, even just in the Bay Area. But we have the ability to tinker around with new financial tools, like our investment in Landed, where we help make down payments for homes in the Bay Area possible for teachers, though often missed working middle class. And we also engage in advocacy and making sure that the right incentives and bonds are in place through our local government to incentivize housing development as well. And so it's just the beginning, but we do feel a deep responsibility to give back and make the community that we live in and we love and we've benefited from a great place for many to live in and thrive.
So I know there's some really big controversial issues with philanthropy in the Bay Area. So I wanted to do maybe just a quick lightning round and just get very quick responses on this because I have a few more topics to get to. But when it comes to living conditions, do you think we should be building as much housing as possible or only focusing on building affordable housing?
We should be protecting what's available and incentivizing building across all areas, and there's different strategies for each.
Great. And so in terms of the homeless issue, do you think we should be trying to get people off the streets or letting them be and allowing them their own agency and how they decide to live?
The homeless issues around homelessness, it is not like home, no home. As a physician, I've seen how complicated these issues are, and it really is about thinking about the person holistically and making sure they have access to the right care.
And then obviously needles have been a big issue that's been widely discussed in the Bay. Do you think we should be having safe injection sites or more policing on the streets for open drug use?
I think we have to think about the ways where we improve access to care, and if there's all different ways to incentivize people to feel safe and to come in to access the right type of care that will lead them towards long-term success.
Great, I appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about politics. Does CZI have a political affiliation?
We are a nonpartisan organization, and we work on issues that are, they're just issues about humans and human lives. And we have found that with that approach, we find allies on both sides of the aisle.
So I know that politics can be a powerful way to make change and affect those human lives, and we've seen people like the Koch brothers use their wealth to donate to political campaigns to drive their policy beliefs. How do you feel about using CZI to donate to political campaigns?
We focus on issues, and we defer to folks who, like for instance, criminal justice reform. We fund different groups, crime survivors, formerly incarcerated individuals. And we believe in the ability for those who are closest to the issues to help formulate the solution. And so they're not our solutions. We're supporting those on the front lines who have real lived experiences to be able to make a difference in those areas.
So some see Trump as a massive enemy of some of the initiatives that you guys support, whether that's health or education or criminal justice. How do you feel about donating money to candidates looking to challenge him in the next presidential election, if that could be a way to actually impact some of these big areas you guys are working on?
Right now, we are about issues and how we can actually directly impact those issues, and we do not support political candidates.
Got it. So there's a new book called Winners Take All that discusses how the very wealthy donate to important causes, but often fail to push change to the fundamental systems that concentrate extreme wealth in the hands of the few. And the author says that without the structural change, or if we had this structural change, the public and the government would have enough money that they could rely less on philanthropists. What's your take on that perspective, and how do you think wealth should be redistributed?
I'm not sure what the author references in structural change, but I do agree that fundamentally the infrastructure around the way we care for our fellow citizens is broken. And we need to modernize and build them in a way that can continue to evolve and aren't static and allow us to incorporate the best practices that we see individuals practicing and actually build ways for many folks to access. And that can be super vague, but one teacher is doing great work and producing amazing results. How can we actually help democratize that and scale those opportunities for schools who don't have that one phenomenal master teacher to actually be able to deliver that quality of education for their students?
So one of the ways that could really drive a lot more money back to the government would be an inheritance tax. Would you support laws that might see Max and August inherit very little of your fortune?
Well, Max and August are going to inherit very little of our fortune, but the vast majority of our wealth has gone to CZI. But I do believe that increased taxation can be a good thing for our country.
So your family's legacy has come a bit under fire recently because of social media's impact on democracy and well-being. 50 years from now, what do you want the salient point of your own legacy to be?
We believe that the world can be, we are just incredible optimists. And if our legacy is that we were just incredible dreamers, that were able to chase down hard, big, hairy problems and do our piece, and our piece at CZI being around this comprehensive view of problems and building and engineering, I'd be quite proud of that.
Maybe finally, how do you feel about digital well-being? Your daughters are going to be using screens eventually. What's your perspective on that, given that Mark has built the most successful use of people's time on the internet? How do you guys control that? What's your take on that for Max?
Well, they're really small. Our children are 1 and 2. But I have the same philosophy for my children as I do for all children. It really depends on what is it used for. And I think we can all agree that there are bad uses of screen time, but I think very few people in this room would disagree that a video call with a grandparent is a bad use of screen time. And so just really being thoughtful about how we curate those experiences to make sure that they're developmentally appropriate.
I think that theme of how we use it applies back to what we talked to at the beginning, which is that, yes, there's lots of people with lots of money in the world, and it's not necessarily just about how that money is used or if you do take a full-time job in philanthropy, but about inspiring people to do what they can and do what's best with the time or the money that they have. So thank you for being an inspiration to so many in the philanthropy world and to the rest of the world as well.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Cheers.